There are two kinds of metal in this yard, scrap and art. If you gotta eat one of them, eat the scrap. What you currently have in your mouth is art! Art? Oh, forget it. It's gone. It's That's not bad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Alison, and this is not Maintaining Frame. This is actually Red Chill Cinema. I'm going to have to change it afterwards, and we're going to be talking about some recent changes that are going on within... there's like big moves happening within the animation industry, specifically stuff involving Disney, Pixar, and this new company called Skydance Studios. And I heard news about this, and I wanted to present a case as to what's actually going on behind the scenes and potential reasons why. And I don't think a lot of people are making this connection. So I brought on Alison to come with me, who doesn't know what I'm about to show her, to see what her thoughts are on my, I guess, theories.
You mean your cartoon conspiracy?
Yes, my cartoon conspiracy theory.
Yes.
And yeah, like there is it's one of these things where it seems like it's not a big deal, but then like there's something like bigger happening, and it's and you might be surprised to find that it is in fact related to men's issues. And
it's the men's issues conspiracy.
Yeah, it's in more ways than you might think. So that's kind of what I want to. Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't know what Brian wants from me, but I am here, and I will do my best.
Well, I think you might like this because it seems to lend towards a theory that you had actually proposed a while back. So it's almost going to be like a bit nostalgic. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about what is happening in terms of the news regarding these changes. So we have this company. It's called Skydance, and they produce films. They're like a film production company started in part by Tom Cruise. Now, why would Tom Cruise do that? Well, Tom Cruise wanted to be able to make films without the red tape and bureaucracy in Hollywood regarding projects he wants to take on. So you might have noticed, for example, that Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible movies are all under Skydance, or at least like the recent ones are. And this was because he was looking for more leeway, more authority over his projects, right? Okay, so say whatever you want about Tom Cruise. That's not really important, but it is interesting to know where Skydance came from and how it started. But here's the other thing. Skydance is now adding, or they're expanding their I guess you could say their talents to include animators and people to make animated films, right? Right now, in terms of like the big budget animated film companies that produce animated movies, there is really kind of a small number. You got Disney, obviously, Pixar, which is basically owned by Disney, so they're one and the same now. Then you have like some of the lesser known ones. You have DreamWorks, who I've always liked, and then you have like, you know, little, like really small studios. I think Glenn Keane, who used to be an animator with Disney, has made his own company. He is best known for having worked on The Little Mermaid, and I think his daughter was involved with Tangled. So you get an idea of like why, you know, Tangled has like a really nice aesthetic that feels a lot like Little Mermaid, because it's the daughter learned from the father and she went on to do Tangled. You have Laika, which is one of my favorite studios. They make stop motion like films like Coraline and Paranorman and my favorite Kubo and the Two Strings. Absolutely beautiful movies. Unfortunately, Leica spends a great deal of time on these films, and they don't tend to do well in the box office. It's probably just because they don't have the same exposure and the same hype that anything that Disney or DreamWorks puts out. So,
which is mostly crap now, it's my opinion.
Yeah, I like DreamWorks still, though. I mean, I haven't really watched them much lately, but I always felt that DreamWorks was a little bit more like edgy, and they were willing to take some more risks. I mean,
I'm going to say something that may be considered controversial.
Okay.
I used to really love Disney movies.
Yeah.
People probably, you're judging me, I know, but I liked.
I still like the old ones.
Yeah, I thought they were really great exercises in storytelling. Mm-hmm. And really solid storytelling, entertaining from beginning to end, and also characterization. And then I watched The Princess and the Frog. And while I thought that The Princess and the Frog was decent, there was something about it. The storytelling was not to the same level as I was expecting from Disney.
Yeah.
And since then, the more Disney puts out so-called progressive kind of films, I've noticed the greater and greater deterioration in their actual ability to tell a story.
Yes.
And it started like, I actually like The Princess and the Frog. I actually even like the characterization, but I noticed that
in the movie or in the original story?
In the movie too.
Okay. In the movie.
So I'm not coming at it from a point where I disliked it. Mm-hmm. I liked the character designs. I liked the setting. I liked like I said, the character interactions. But there was just some kind of something missing in the actual storytelling, in the actual plotting, and I could not tell you exactly what it is. I'd have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but that's when I started to notice that I was no longer as invested in the characters that Disney's creating. Like I said, it seemed to be like the beginning of the end.
For me, it started with Pocahontas. I think that was when I was officially like disinterested. And Mulan, I don't know which one came first, but I didn't care for them. Even back then. So sorry for anybody who likes I'll Make a Man Out of You from Mulan.
Well, you can like that without liking the rest of the film, right?
Yeah, I know. But most of the time when people bring up Mulan, they start singing, the song Make a Man Out of You. Just kind of like Lindsay, if I'm with Lindsay and I mention Pocahontas, she starts doing the Savages song. She just starts singing it.
What's really interesting is that how about the Hunchback of Notre Dame? You didn't mind that one? That one was really adult.
No, I did like Hunchback, but it was a weird movie because it was like it didn't know if it wanted to be adult or for children. So you ended up with this like weird I don't know, like a kind of a Frankenstein's monster of middle ground between like, the priest lusting after this woman and like, and of course the voice actor for Frollo was great. And then you have like these goofy like Jason Alexander gargoyles. And so it was like, well, I mean, the original tale is probably not really for kids. And I think Disney wanted to try to like make that work, but I don't think it would have.
I would say it's the most adult Disney cartoon I've ever seen, aside from like maybe Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yeah. But yeah, that was some serious. Those were some serious adult themes in that. But I think maybe part of it was with Pocahontas and the Princess and the Frog. And what was the other one that we were talking about? Mulan. They almost got away from that formula of having a villainess,
Yeah.
What I noticed is that sometimes if they had the main male character, they would have a villain, but if they had a female character, they'd have a villainess. So it became sort of a examination of a moral dilemma or moral agency. So the villainess became a negative version the female heroine, right?
Yeah, like Ursula from The
Ursula
Little Mermaid,
yeah.
and Maleficent, and you
Yeah.
know, these other characters. Yeah.
So it had a lot. I think it had a lot more of a archetypal impact, maybe, or even like just having that what I call moral contrast between two female characters really makes their story more interesting. And when you remove that, it makes it a lot less interesting. Like Mulan, I guess she may have the matchmaker as an antagonist, but it doesn't really seem to like there's no other female character that you really can compare Mulan to morally. It's the same with Pocahontas. Although you could say John Smith is the main character, compared to whatever the guy is, I forget his name.
Oh, the guy who sings the Savages song. Savages.
They both
even
sides
human.
sing the Savages.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. But then like it's sort of, I mean, I think they're kind of presenting like a patriarchal model in Pocahontas. And I think that's why it bugs me, because it's not like, you know, the natives, they're just as hostile, and that would seem to be fair, but in both cases they're led by a man, and it's sort of implied that that's the reason why they're like that. So because, you know, Pocahontas knows, you know, that she knows that that's not how the way forward, and of course John Smith is civilized by her, which is why he also, you know, knows, because he has found, it's sort of like this Dances with Wolves thing, you know. But you know what? We're getting way off on this. I get where you're coming from. I think for us, we started at different points, but like for me, I know that I was disinterested in Disney movies after Pocahontas, partly because they were all just becoming really formulaic. There was like a cute animal, and there was like a comedy relief, and it was like everything that worked about like Aladdin. They just kept doing that, you know, because it worked. And I thought if things were just starting to get, I got the sense that it was just being phoned in a lot of the time. But that's not really the point I'm trying to make. So in Pixar, when they first came on the scene with Toy Story, they were unstoppable. Like everything they made was a huge hit. And even the weirder, obscure ones like Bug's Life, you know, were like massive hits. First of all, we had this new technology that they were, you know, like the pioneers of, and they were making the most with, that everybody was fascinated by. But beyond that, the stories had heart, and they were just really well done. You know, Toy Story is what most people go to. I think that it is one of the high points early on. And so like John Lasseter, who was the guy at, you know, Pixar, the guy who essentially made Toy Story a household name, the guy who ended up like essentially making this company into something so big that Disney just had to have it. He got Me Too'd. And there was this open letter, let me see if I can find it, from the Animation Guild, which is basically like a union for animators. And they were working in tandem with another organization, I guess they call themselves a nonprofit, called Women in Animation, WIA. And by the way, Women in Animation is exactly what you think it is. It's run by a woman named Marge Dean, and they are a feminist organization that tries to promote women in the animation industry. Now, they don't do it from a perspective of, you know, like, we just want people to notice that there are women trying to break in, and here are some talented women that want to be a part of it. They are interested in essentially just putting in quotas in various companies to ensure that a company has women in their teams. And we've talked about this before on our show in the past. I had on a guy named Luke Weber, who was an animator, and he experienced this kind of like hostile work environment towards men firsthand, especially men of merit, which he is. He's an amazing artist and animator. And when the Me Too movement happened, the Women in Animation in partnership with the Animation Guild, which is a union organization that's supposed to protect the rights of animators as workers, put out an open letter. And I'm going to go ahead and read the open letter so you guys know where this is coming from. This was years ago, okay? Dear Animation Guild members, earlier this week, the Animation Guild expressed its unequivocal support of Black communities over social media. However, we felt it crucial to take a deeper dive into this painful topic and the ways in which our union can do better. We are profoundly saddened and outraged by the senseless killing of George Floyd, condemn the ongoing discrimination of the persecution Black Americans face at the hands of their fellow Americans. This list is long, and then they go into some of them. Members of law enforcement cannot be allowed to act with impunity and impenetrable. So, so they're virtue signaling about race for like 3 or 4 paragraphs. And then they call on the Animation Guild members, especially those in positions of seniority and hiring power, to take a hard, honest look at the compositions of their crews and to take a stand regarding hiring choices. Of course, it is not enough to just hire Black artists. We must give them clear pathways into leadership positions if we truly want to change the industry. Furthermore, our membership must have difficult conversations with loved ones and coworkers. And they also wrote a letter that I have somewhere on my computer. It was an open letter regarding the Me Too movement and the treatment of women in the animation industry. It was signed by several women who work in the animation industry, who are essentially signing off on the idea that sexual harassment and discrimination against women in the workplace, in animation, is real, it is serious, and something must be done. One of the people who signed this petition was Rebecca Sugar, who you guys might know as the creator of, what's that show that she made with the boy? And he's got there's gems in it. You know what I'm talking about? For some reason, I'm forgetting the show, but she was one of the creators behind that. Okay. God, you know what? I don't remember it. I had it and now I lost it. It doesn't matter. After this came out, okay, this open letter and this other virtue signal thing, men, not just white men, just men generally, found them. Yeah, Steven Universe. Thank you, Hothead. They found themselves essentially being accused of sexual harassment. One of these people was John Lasseter. John Lasseter, who is the guy, again, who brought Pixar to new heights. I have here a little clip from a USA Today article. Pixar co-founder and former Disney animation chief John Lasseter, who last year was forced out after acknowledging missteps in his behavior with women staff members. So this was from 2019. So in 2018, he found himself forced to resign from Pixar. Okay. And so what did John Lasseter do? Well, obviously, when you get canceled, you don't just disappear off the face of the earth. So John Lasseter has been in talks with Skydance Studios to start an animation company. And Skydance, partially owned by Tom Cruise, accepted his offer. And so John Lasseter now works at Skydance Animation after having been Me Too'd and thrown out of Pixar. Okay. John Lasseter, the content that he made or that he was most involved with is kind of interesting too, because John Lasseter was heavily involved with Toy Story and he was involved with Cars, which I know is not everyone's favorite, myself included, as far as Pixar films go. But it's important to bear in mind that in interviews with John Lasseter before Cars was released, he did say that this was a something for young boys. It was basically targeted at young boys, right? Very young, not like Toy Story where there's some, more mature themes in it that adults could take something away from. But Cars was never meant to be that. It was meant to be for children. It's actually, I think, inspired by a very old Tex Avery short with a family of cars. You guys remember that? There was an old Tex Avery thing. And they did another one later with planes, which is weird because they made a movie called Planes later. By the way, John Lasseter not involved with planes. So he was Me Too'd because he was a kind of affectionate guy. He would hug people and all this. And of course, women that were looking to remove him, to replace him with people that they thought should be in his position, they Me Too'd him. And I know that sounds like a serious allegation that I'm levying, but this has been going on all over the animation industry. People get Me Too'd, they're forced out, and then the Women in Animation organization puts a woman in that place, or they put at least a man who is going to promote their ultimate agenda. And by the way, the Women in Animation ultimate agenda is called 50-50 by 2050, I think, where they basically want the entire animation industry to be half male and half female, regardless of qualifications, regardless of how good they are at their job. None of that matters. They just want 50-50 representation, which means if there's more women than men by that time, that's okay too. So John Lasseter goes and starts an animation company with Skydance. He was heavily involved with Toy Story and Cars and Bugs Life and other projects, okay? Would you say that Toy Story is gendered? No, I wouldn't say gendered, but do you think that it's aimed at more so boys as an audience or girls as an audience? I'll put it that way.
I think the original ones were aimed at boys or boys and girls. I think the current ones, I have no idea what tone or they're trying to hit, because
Lasseter wasn't involved. Lasseter wasn't involved with the fourth one. I think he stopped after the third one.
Having Bo Peep guilt, the cowboy character whose name Woody. Having Bo Peep guilt Woody into abandoning his friends as kind of like a moral lesson. Very strange. Mm-hmm. Very strange. Mm-hmm. Not something that I really felt totally comfortable watching. It felt more like like instead of something that you would present to children, it seemed more like an adult indulgence for adult audiences who screw up their lives because they have no sense of loyalty and then want some kind of frickin' justification, like it's the moral thing to do. You know, if that makes any sense, because and it's fine with adult fiction to have those kind of ambiguous moral questions, but with kids, you're trying to give them the foundation to develop their own sense of themselves as moral agents. Yeah, and I don't know, it just rang false. As a message that you would send to kids, it was too, I don't know, like demoralizing, nihilistic. It just struck me as sort of gross. Anyway,
I understand. You know what? It reminds me of. I didn't watch Toy Story 4, so I'm just going off of what you've said. But I did see some of the stuff with Bo Peep, and I'm like, that character wasn't even that important. Like, why are you guys making her so big? She was a side character originally. But yeah, I mean, obviously I know why. And I don't think that Lasseter was involved with Toy Story 4. He was involved with the first 3, and you could see that there is like a more consistent theme of, you know, loyalty to your friend, which is essentially Andy, on the part of the toys. And that, you know, that's super endearing, right? And that Andy grew up with those toys, right? So obviously there's an attachment there that you know, he was trying to communicate. So,
and in this film, that's totally destroyed.
Yeah, like it reminds me of
the film is basically do what your woman says, even if it means betraying your friends. I'm like, or leaving your friends. And also Bo Peep becomes like the generic, actually almost generic young adult female dystopian lead. It's really bizarre. I'm like watching this, something. They're going for girls now.
Yeah, they're going for girls now. But it's funny because what you're describing in Toy Story 4 is very similar to what happened in Wreck-It Ralph 2, which I'm going to get to because that's also interesting. All right.
One other thing I would say before we go is it's interesting how they take something that's originally aimed either at boys or boys and girls, and the way they make it aimed at girls is by removing the moral message, the actual moral message of, be loyal to your friends, stand up for your beliefs, and they replace it with do whatever the hell you want. Because
don't let anybody put you in a box, right?
Yeah, don't let anyone put you in a box. And don't feel like you have any responsibility to anybody but your fleeting motions in the moment. And I'm like, so essentially they take a boy's story and they remove all reason and accountability.
Yeah.
and they get a story aimed at girls.
It's true. All right, so anyway, John Lasseter starts his own company, and that's fine. I think a lot of people just sort of said, okay, well, yeah, of course he has the right to do that. But then Skydance brings on Brad Bird for a new feature project, but it's also an exclusive contract. So who is Brad Bird? Brad Bird also worked for Pixar, and he made some of the best Pixar movies. But before he did that, he made a little movie, or he was involved with and directed a little movie called The Iron Giant. And I asked Alison about The Iron Giant. I want to show you guys a couple of clips I have from The Iron Giant. Because, okay, so Brad Bird did not have to leave Pixar. He wasn't Me Too'd, okay? He chose to leave. He chose to go over to Skydance because he wanted to make animations. He wanted to make animated films. I guess like that the Disney wasn't going to let him make. One of them is a project that he's been wanting to make for a long time called Ray Gun, which is about a detective in a kind of like retro futurist world, kind of like a Buck Rogers world with like a detective character. And it sounds like it's right up Brad Bird's alley because he does have an attraction to this kind of 1950s, 1960s aesthetic, which is expressed in his films Iron Giant and The Incredibles, which I also want to mention because I think there's something really interesting going on with what Brad Bird is communicating with his work, whether he will confess to it or not. So here's a clip from The Iron Giant. I'm going to share this with Alison so that you can see it, but not just see it, but so that you can hear it as well. So let me stop sharing OBS and I'm going to start sharing the video because otherwise you're not going to get any sound. Okay? Now, so join my stream, Alison. All right. All right. So here's the
joined.
Yeah. So this is the end of the movie. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen The Iron Giant. But if you haven't, it came out in like 1999 and you should definitely watch it. Iron Giant is a fantastic movie. And it wasn't like a big thing, like it was made by Warner Brothers. It didn't blow up, but it's a good film. So let's play this bit. So this is at the end of the movie, and throughout the whole film, the boy, his name is Hughes, Hogarth Hughes. He bonds with this robot, and I think they just call him Iron Giant in the movie. And throughout, the boy is teaching the Iron Giant about morality and about personal choice and about the importance of doing the right thing. And the boy he doesn't have a father, so he's being raised by a single mom who works as like a waitress. And the boy Hogarth, we don't know what happened to his father. We presume that that the mother is a widow because she is a good mother to him, and he finds a kind of like friendship with the Iron Giant. And at the end of the film, the government is actually trying to get the robot because they're afraid it's a foreign weapon. It has to be stopped. It could be from outer space. We never really learn where the giant comes from. And they launch this FBI CIA character launches a nuclear missile at the Iron Giant, and because the giant is in a town full of people, he has to make a decision. And this, of course, is the culmination of everything that the boy has been teaching the Iron Giant about, the importance of your ability to choose what you want to be, and how, he models his behavior after Superman, because the boy looks up to Superman as like this, aspirational character, and the Iron Giant wants to live up to that. So he sees the giant, figures out what he has to do.
Giant?
You're probably gonna have to stop soon.
Yeah, I paused it there.
remembering what, and stop me if I'm repeating anything. The giant, you talked about the giant's origins, right?
Yeah, they don't really explain it. He just kind of like comes from, he falls from the sky and he starts wandering around eating metal. So we don't really learn where he's from.
But there is a moral conflict in the story that they present. This Iron Giant, I think it was intended to conquer Earth or do something to the people of Earth, like subjugate them. And he has to make a choice to sacrifice himself as a result of his relationship with this boy, to protect the people of Earth. And so there's a moral conflict that this character has. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to point that out because I think that's part of the real strong impact of the story. This is more than just, it's more than just self-sacrifice. This is also questioning your moral conclusions or your expectations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uka, you stay. I go. No following.
I love you.
All right, I'm pausing it there for the banana again.
I'd also like to point out that the boy lost his father in World War II.
Yeah, I think so. They don't really say it explicitly to my memory, but it's I think that's what it is.
Photos in the his house.
Yes, and so the boy saying "I love you" to the giant is also really important because there is like there is a connection to the giant that I think it also makes him feel connected to his late father. I think that to some degree also there's like I played the clip at the beginning of the beatnik guy who works in the junkyard, who kind of like, steps in that role by the end. So there is definitely a lot of masculine relationships, right, that are being presented here because Brad Bird, I think, is drawing from, to some degree, personal experience to tell his story, which is why he tells it well. But let's play another clip, or a little bit more. All right, I'm just pausing it there. It's just, I can't play the whole thing without getting in trouble.
If you think about it, this is also a way for the boy to say goodbye to his father and conceptualize his death.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's actually really good because he goes into space. So, all right. So and then there is like a central message beyond everything else too, that they're going to iterate here.
You are who you choose to be.
Superman.
So he sacrifices himself. Well, he doesn't really die because, kids movie, but it's very powerful. And I think that it's the reason why, like, a lot of people have, if they've seen this film, they have fond memories of it. But without those central, like, the core message that he's getting at with this is that we are who we choose to be, right? The giant was programmed to conquer Earth, and he was designed as a weapon by God knows who. But the giant, because he had these interactions with his boy, learns about personal choice. And like that's what he does at the end. That's why this film, for people who like it, why it resonates, Play a little bit more of this. so everybody's safe, you know. And there was another clip that I wanted to show. I have a couple from Iron Giant, because I think I think this is a movie made by a guy, Brad Bird, who I think is still very much in tune with his inner child. And I don't mean that in like an immature way. I mean that I think that he knows that there's something like extremely precious and wholesome about the boy in men that he wants to express, and he does it with these stories. I think that's what Toy Story is. I think that because I think Brad Bird was involved with Toy Story as well. That's what The Incredibles is, although there's other things going on in The Incredibles as well, and Iron Giant. So let's listen to this. I think this is pretty good too. This is Hogarth is hanging out with, I forget the beatnik's name, and you can see the beatnik. He's very funny. He's like the yin yang on his. These guys were like the pre-hippies, right? The beatniks.
Yes.
And yeah, so he's got the yin yang on his robe. He's like the pre-hipsters basically. And the boy he's covering for the giant in this scene. Because the giant's hungry and he takes him to the scrapyard and the giant wants to feed, but he has to like occupy Dean. That's right. Who's the guy who's the beatnik that runs the junkyard. Protecting
the junkyard, yeah.
Yeah.
Or does he own the junkyard?
He owns it because he uses some of the junk to make art, because he's an artist, right? So he makes these like sculptures out of junk. And and he's sort of like, he's an outsider. He's not like, you know, he's kind of like he doesn't get along with people in the town. He's not a normie, right? He's kind of a weirdo. That's why he lives in the dump and he makes art and, you know, he drinks espresso coffees and wears yin yang robes. And so the boy bonds with him over coffee. So I'm going to play that part.
I'm gonna have some coffee. What do you want? Some milk or what? Milk?
Coffee's fine. Yeah, I drink it. I'm hip.
I don't know. This is espresso, you know? It's like CoffeeZilla.
I said I'm hip.
All right. So I try to pay attention when the boy, I think they're going to cut to a scene where the boy's on coffee. And if you listen to what he's saying, it's like he has a bunch of stuff he wants to get off of his chest that he can't do with his mother. And so he's doing this with Dean. And so they're bonding over coffee.
So she moved me up a grade because I wasn't fitting in, so now I'm even more not fitting in. I was getting good grades, you know, like always. So my mom says, you need stimulation. And I go, no, I'm stimulated enough right now.
That's for sure.
So she goes, you don't have a challenge. You need a challenge. So now I'm challenged, all right? I'm challenged to hold on to my lunch money because of all the big mooses who want to pound me because I'm a shrimpy dork who thinks he's smarter than them. But I don't think I'm smarter. I just do the stupid homework. If everyone else just did the stupid homework, they could move up a grade and get pounded too. Is there any more coffee?
That's adorable.
Yeah, so I like that too because again, you know, there is like this idea that men don't talk about their feelings, and this boy is spilling his guts to this stranger. But I think it's because he's a man that's willing to listen to him. And also Dean kind of treats the boy like a man because he gives him the coffee. But what's really great is Dean's piece of advice that he gives afterwards.
Look, it's really none of my business, kid, but who cares what these creeps think, you know? They don't decide who you are, you do. You are who you choose to be.
So yeah, that's kind of, I think, one of the central. It's about individualism.
I love the face that you paused on there.
Yeah, I know. He's like, it's a revelation.
Whoa, mind blown.
Yeah,
that's sort of adorable. Yeah. Oh no, yeah, I see that. It's very, very strong relationships between the male characters in this story. I have noticed something about a lot of fiction. And this isn't something that started recently. This is something I've seen in a lot of fiction for a very long time. there are a lot of writers who cannot for the life of them write a strong relationship between two men or a man and a boy.
Mm-hmm.
They can't develop a strong sympathetic connection between two male human beings. And it's like I said, it's not something that necessarily, I think social justice warriors made it worse, but I saw it. I've been seeing it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like you know about the Bechdel test, right?
Oh yeah.
You think about all of the movies in which the male characters have almost no relationship to another man, and I don't mean like a sexual relationship, but a friendship, and not a friendship that's necessarily played for laughs, but like a genuine supportive friendship, like a buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there
not
seems
anymore.
to be less.
Not
Not
anymore.
anymore.
No.
Not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. And I noticed that's really, even before it sort of leaked into Hollywood and the TV shows, I noticed it in a lot of, I dare I say it, like geek fiction, that there are a lot of male writers. Well, female writers I'll give a pass to because they're not really expected to understand that. But there are a lot of male writers, science fiction, fantasy. Oh, and especially like the crap that what do they call it? Like literature. Which is, I can't stand that stuff. It's realistic fiction. Which has got to be the most indulgent fiction I've ever read.
Yeah.
With a caveat, unless the person writing it has gone to war.
Yeah.
Because every time I read realistic fiction from a soldier, it's good stuff. But civilians, I don't even know why they're bothering to introspect about their lives, because their lives are meaningless. But and that's what literature is. So with those genres, I noticed one, very cliched. Many male writers would write the typical, ball busting girl power woman who repels the male's sexual interest, and I'm like, oh God, please not again. And how many of these female characters do we need in fiction? And then they would really struggle with camaraderie between men. Like they did not know how to write it at all.
That's right. Without making it sexual or something. Like, I agree. I was just talking about that with Lindsay because I was like getting all these clips together, and I was looking at the relationship between Hogarth and the Iron Giant, not in terms of it being like a buddy movie, but it was more like a big brother, little brother, like where Hogarth is the big brother and he's teaching this like little brother about the world. And that's that relationship. But when it comes to like the buddy well, obviously they were like very close friends, but when it comes to the buddy relationship, I was talking to Lindsay about Woody and Buzz was one example that a lot of people, go to. But then there was like, do you remember? I don't remember their names, like Miguel and something else from The Road to El Dorado. And I'm just going to stay on animation because I think those are the relationships that are being like, they're not being included. They're not being utilized. There was a number of those kinds of things. Tulio, thank you, Miguel and Tulio, from The Road to El Dorado, which is a very beloved movie, and it's basically a buddy movie. Or The Emperor's New Groove is another one that's basically a buddy movie, right? So
those are great. Yeah. Have you seen anything like it so far? I mean,
not recently. No. I mean, granted, I haven't really been like concerning myself much with new media, but I'll say something. I will say something. I think that I saw it with the anime based on Dota, Dragons of. Oh, are you?
Yeah,
I think I know what you're talking about. I don't know.
Let me get the exact. Dragons of. Defense of the Ancients. Sorry, I thought it was dragons because there's so many freaking dragons, and that's Defense of the Ancients.
I never knew what Dota stood for. I know what it is. It's like one of those. The hell do you call them? Tower defense RTS things, like League of Legends.
so they did an animation around it, and it's actually pretty good. Like they did it has a pretty solid story. The second season, I think, might have actually been better than the first. And I watched it, and it drew my interest from the first episode to the last. And it does actually have decent male characters, like relationships in them. For example, there's the mentorship between the chief, like Dragon Knight, or one of the main Dragon Knights, and the Dragon Knight that we're following, who's sort of tainted with the spirit of a dragon. And he's contending with that. And that was a really solid relationship. In the first season, it was sort of set up as almost antagonistic. But in the last episode, it shows the elder Dragon Knight's care for the main character. She's like, I probably should get some names.
Oh, it's okay. I think I get what you're saying. I have a good deal of ground I'd like to cover, though, but that might be a good example of it being well done. I'm just saying in general, though, it's been scaled back a lot, especially in the major animation studios like Pixar, Disney, and even DreamWorks. I mean, they did Road to El Dorado, but that was years ago. Okay, so this scene I think is really important from the Iron Giant as well. This is where Hogarth teaches the giant about death, because the giant doesn't know what it is, and they run into a deer in the woods, and the giant's fascinated by the deer, and then the deer runs off because there are hunters, and one of the hunters kills a deer, and now the Iron Giant's learning about death, and Hogarth is the one that teaches him, which sort of gives you an idea of how mature this boy is. And his understanding of it, probably because of his father.
It's dead. Don't do that!
Just pausing there for the banana. I'm going to play a little bit more. Okay, here we go.
Why?
It's dead, understand? They shot it with that gun. Hey, what's wrong?
They didn't show. So I thought this clip would include the bit where Hogarth says, you know, like, he basically says that, like, killing is wrong, but death is not, and that death itself is natural. And he tries to explain to the giant that, you know, the hunters weren't, like, necessarily bad for doing that, because they were, you know, we have to eat, and he doesn't really go into all that detail, but he essentially says, you know, like, everything dies, it's okay, right? And the giant says to the boy, says, do you die? And Hogarth, I believe he says, yeah, eventually, right? So he teaches the giant about life and death and why life is precious, which I think is one of the reasons why the giant decides to save the people of the city later, because Hogarth teaches him about morality. And that it is not something that is subjective, right? He treats it as a real thing based on Hogarth's experiences, which again we can only infer, but I think he learned about the fragility of life and the reality of death from losing his father. So you know, this is a not insignificant thing, and I thought that was you know, really really important.
Powerful?
Yeah, extremely powerful, and it's so mature, and it doesn't treat the audience like children. It doesn't, like, this could be a kids movie, and I think that they would not be, like, completely traumatized by this, you know, these sorts of realizations. So so that's Brad Bird. Okay, now Brad Bird did another project. The other project is, just waiting for this, is The Incredibles. And The Incredibles is my favorite Pixar movie, period. Like, that's my favorite Pixar movie, hands down. And it's not just because it's about superheroes, although I do think he captured the essence of that better than even most superhero films today do. But that's not really why I like it. It's because of the central message of The Incredibles, which is, well, I'm going to cover it. So here's a scene from The Incredibles that I think basically, in a lot of ways, it summarizes what The Incredibles is kind of like trying to say.
Dash, this is the third time this year you've been sent to the office. We need to find a better outlet, a more constructive outlet.
Maybe I could if you'd let me go out for sports.
Honey, you know why we can't do that.
But I promise I'll slow up. I'll only be the best by a tiny bit.
Dash, old Robert Parr, you are an incredibly competitive boy and a bit of a show-off. The last thing you need is temptation.
All right, I'm just pausing there for the banana. I'm going to go back a little bit. I know a lot of people know this scene, but I do think it's important. So Dash got in trouble in school because he was playing pranks on the teacher. Do you remember that, Allison? He was putting a tack on the seat, and the teacher would, you know, sit down, and he would sit on the tack. And he was sure the boy was doing it, but he couldn't prove it because Dash has powers. He has super speed, so he can run to the, you know, put the tack down and go back to his seat without anyone noticing. And this is because the reason why Dash is doing this is because he feels as a young boy that, you know, everyone is holding him back. They're keeping him from essentially being what he is. They're trying to like force an identity of conformity and suppression of himself from everyone else. Okay. And this, of course, is frustrating for Dash. It's also frustrating, by the way, for Mr. Incredible, who is experiencing the same thing. And I think it's really interesting that it's happening to the boys in the family most of all. I think to some degree, it's Violet is also dealing with issues because she can't be herself. And so she just sort of hides inside of herself, which is, I think, the reason why she can turn invisible and create a force field, which is like a safe space. But that's what I think symbolically what that means. But so Helen, Elastigirl, who's Dash's mother, is essentially like trying to keep the family together, but she's also trying to work within the legal framework that has been forced on the supers, right? So she doesn't want the family to be exposed as supers because she's afraid that they're going to end up having to relocate and they're going to have to change their life. And she just wants everyone to play along. And this is what she's trying to do. So, and of course, Dash points out that Helen's approach doesn't make sense. And this is the rest of the clip.
You always say, do your best, but you don't really mean it. Why can't I do the best that I can do?
Right now, honey, the world just wants us to fit in. And to fit in, we just gotta be like everybody else.
But Dad always said our powers were nothing to be ashamed of. Our powers made us special.
Everyone's special, Dash.
Which is another way of saying no one is.
And that's what the central message of The Incredibles is. And it's so great they do it again. They bring it back at the end of the movie.
The ship's unique design suggests there were no
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool! Just like a movie! The robot will emerge dramatically, do some damage, throw in some screaming people, and just when all hope is lost, Syndrome will save the day! I'll be a bigger hero than you ever were.
You mean you killed off real heroes so that you could pretend to be one?
Oh, I'm real. Real enough to defeat you!
Just pausing there for the banana again. The Incredibles is such a good movie. I love this movie.
And I did it without your precious gifts, your oh-so-special powers. I'll give them heroics. I'll give them the most spectacular heroics anyone's ever seen! And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super! And when everyone's super... no one will be.
So
basically super communism.
Yeah. Well, basically,
through capitalism.
If he uses, if he sells all of his inventions to make everyone, well, the society is sick in this movie because, no one wants the government essentially made the situation so that supers have to live like everyone else. So they are literally oppressed. They literally have to be told to operate within a certain framework. And because the government originally owned the superheroes when, you know, like they worked for the government, the superheroes, before they were, this gave the government power over them in the sort of legal sense, right? And Syndrome is basically like, well, if we, you know, I can use my inventions to make everyone super. And that essentially removes what makes them unique and special. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to end anything that makes people exceptional, anything involving merit. Now, you could argue that having superpowers isn't really meritocratic, but the superpowers are not, it's not literally that. It's about people who are exceptional, whether they're exceptionally talented, they have athletic ability, they're creative, they're intelligent. And it's about like how, oh, well, people that are exceptional in these ways, but whether it's because of their creativity, their talent, their skill, or even just, you know, having the wherewithal to just keep moving forward, being part of that, what is it, the top 20% of the Pareto principle, those people who just excel. There are the people who don't think that they should be allowed to do that because they might make people who don't do that well feel bad. And that's kind of what that's about. There's a lot of like Ayn Rand in it, but it's basically about the, you know, I guess you could say it's about the desire to make everyone else in your world feel comfortable over your desire to be who you are, which is kind of reminiscent of the Iron Giant again, where the guy says, why do you care about what other people think when you should only essentially try to be the best version of yourself that you can be? And I don't think that Brad Bird, who made both movies, is saying the same things. He's just saying it again. And even, I think, A Bug's Life, he was involved with that one. And that had a similar message, too, where the locusts were like, they had to use like fear and, authoritarianism and intimidation to keep the bugs in line, because the locusts were actually in the minority. And if the bugs realized it, they would be done, right? That was what the locusts were concerned with, which is actually really interesting because it's kind of like a lot like these authoritarian cancel culture mobs online. They actually represent a very small percentage of people, but they want us to think that there's more of them and that they're actually more terrifying than they actually are. They're literally cultural locusts, and it's the same thing. So yeah, Bug's Life is underrated, but that's a good example of what I'm getting at. And that was that scene. And there's another thing. Okay, in The Incredibles, this is because Alice, did you ever see The Incredibles 2?
Yes, I did see The Incredibles 2.
I did not like that movie, and I don't know how you felt about it, but it felt like it was just inverting The Incredibles 1, except that Mr. Incredible stayed the goofy doofus character, and Mrs. Incredible stayed like, you know, the sort of she became more obnoxious in Incredibles 2 than she was in the first one. Because in the first one, well, I'll go into it, but let me play this clip of Helen Parr and Robert Parr arguing after Mr. Incredible went and did some heroic stuff because he couldn't help himself.
I'm back, okay?
Is this rubble?
It was just a little workout. Stay loose.
You know how I feel about that, Bob. Darn you, we can't blow cover again.
The building was coming down anyway.
What? You knocked down a building?
It was on fire, structurally unsound. It was coming down anyway.
Tell me you haven't been listening to the police scanner again.
Look, I performed a public service. You act like that's a bad thing.
It is.
Just pausing there for the banana.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm sorry about the volume. I know that some of the video clips are different volumes than others. Like, I can't help that. But what were you going to say, Alison?
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the interesting aspects of this scene is that they deliberately had to have her loom over him. Otherwise, it felt really like just like this large guy menacing this tiny woman. So that I thought that was an interesting thing to aside, but keep going.
All right. So they're arguing over what's more important, Mr. Incredible doing things with his gifts or Mr. Incredible prioritizing the needs of the family first.
It's a bad thing, Bob. Uprooting our family again so you can relive the glory days is a very bad thing.
Reliving the glory days is better than acting like they didn't happen.
Yes, they happened. But this, our family, is what's happening now, Bob. And you are missing this. I can't believe you don't want to go to your own son's graduation.
It's not a graduation. He is moving from the 4th grade to the 5th grade.
That's not a graduation. So you see like what she's okay. This is the thing that I think that's really interesting because Helen Parr does appear to have the moral high ground in this argument, and you could make the case for Mr. Incredible should probably not neglect his family. I don't think that's what he's doing, but I do think that his situation of having to work in this terrible insurance company run by like a super corrupt boss, you know, that doesn't actually have an interest in helping people when the only thing he wants to do is help people. It can be very frustrating, and it's bad for him in terms of like, what does his life mean if he can only, you know, live to serve his family? And that makes him resentful. And that's what, you know, sort of like pushes him into doing these kind of risky things, like scanning, you know, police scanners to go stop crimes, even if they're little crimes, because he wants to do something with his gifts, right? And it seems like she's right, but she's not entirely right because, you know, what Helen learns is that she is holding back her whole family for the sake of fitting in, for the sake of just getting along. She's too agreeable, right? And I think that, and that's exposed. So she's too agreeable. So she goes along with all of these really unfair and downright oppressive things that the government is doing to the Incredibles because the government doesn't want to deal with the lawsuits. And they're just doing it to avoid, you know, that possible consequence.
Cover their ass.
They're covering their ass,
wow,
right?
That doesn't sound like something today.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wanted to say something about the second movie. I can see why it would not appeal at all. And there was, I think, some serious flaws. But again, what I noticed about the second movie is that Mr. Incredible does actually rise to the challenge of taking care of his kids. And he becomes fairly proficient at it. Yeah. And she doesn't really, like, she does sort of screw up going out and being a super too. I think, doesn't she get taken in by the bad guy? Yeah,
she ends up getting taken in by the bad guy and everything. But I don't think that it like she doesn't really have an arc though. Like, you know, it's not like
who did the second one?
Well, okay, so if I remember correctly, Incredibles 2 was Brad Bird's last Pixar movie. And it wasn't only him that was involved. And I think the studio and Disney were heavily involved with the Incredibles 2. Brad Bird had been talking about doing an Incredibles 2 ever since Incredibles 1 came out. But the only thing is that it was basically the big issue was, what would it be about? And and I think that Bird had lots of different things he was playing with. I remember for a while the idea would be that it would pick up like, you know, many years later, and the kids would be young adults and the adults would be much older, and it would basically be a story focused on Dash and Violet more. And I would have been totally open to that. I think that would have been good, as long as they would have been carrying forward a similar theme or something that was compatible. But I think that Disney just was like, we need to make Elastigirl the main character now. And what I believe happened, and I can't prove it because Brad Bird will probably never come forward and say anything, is that he had to deal with a lot of studio interference from the people at the top, from the people in the positions of executive authority at Disney and at Pixar, which is basically the same thing. And he was kind of forced to work within a specific framework where you had to make Elastigirl the main character. It had to be a girl empowerment story of some kind, and whatever else you want to do with it is up to you. So I think there's a reason why the Mr. Incredible scenes still shine in the second movie, is because in a way it's the movie that he wanted to make that was tucked in the movie that the studio wanted him to make. And the fact that he left Disney after that and now works at Skydance, I think further reinforces that theory. Because why would he stay with a company that's not allowing him to make the kinds of content he wants? I mean, because they, you know, and he's not the only guy who left Disney, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. But do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. No,
Okay.
I've perceived some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the thing is too is that it I don't know, like the second one, the primary thing that I think I took away from it was social media bad, because that was kind of like the villain of the story, and I was just kind of like, that's not really as interesting as the first story's central message, or central, not even message, it's more like the thing that it's wrestling with, you know. The second one didn't have that. It was just kind of like more Elastigirl, and then there were like these like weird like alternative superheroes that, you know, I don't remember much about. I don't know, like I didn't think the second one was as good. I think that it was basically because of studio and executive issues with like what they wanted from it, and they were banking on the name to sell it. They were like, well, if it says Incredibles on it, people are gonna watch it. That's why Incredibles 2, I think, had like the it's one of, if not the most highest grossing Pixar movie ever, but I don't think it's the best. So I think it's mainly because of the name. I mean, I would even give credit to like Finding Nemo, which is another really good story about fathers and children, which is another Pixar movie. And I believe that Brad Bird might have been involved with Finding Nemo, I think. I know that Lasseter was, though. So let's play the rest of this.
It's psychotic. They keep creating new ways to celebrate mediocrity, but if someone is genuinely exceptional,
This is not about you, Bob. This is about Dash.
You want to do something for Dash? Then let him actually compete. Let him go out for sports.
I will not be made the enemy here. You know why we can't do that.
Because it'd be great!
This is not about you!
So, you see? Do you see the themes here? I mean, I'm sure you guys caught it before. It's not like they were being subtle. But,
yeah, but also, like, how is him letting his son do what his son stated he wanted to do about him?
Yeah. Well, she's trying to win the argument. So, you know, because again, Helen's concern is she's overly protective of her family. And it's a problem because she can't do it. And I think she realizes this later when they have to go rescue Mr. Incredible from Syndrome. And she basically has to put the kids in costumes, and what's her name? Edna convinces her too. She says, you know, why are you acting like a housewife? You're Elastigirl. You're more than this, right? Why are you suppressing yourself? And she was wrong for that, you know? But that was the thing that she had to realize, right? And she does confess to that in her own way. I think that they still kind of like didn't really zero in on it as much. And, you know, Mr. Incredible gets held to a slightly higher standard of culpability in this movie. But even then, like, there is, you know, you can analyze it and see that in their own ways, both parents had some growing to do. And by the end, they do. They both do. And so, like, you know, that's a big deal. So, especially when it comes to women. The other thing so that's Brad Bird, the guy behind Incredibles and The Iron Giant, and he now works at Skydance. Okay, he wasn't Me Too'd, he just quit Disney and went over to Skydance. Okay, then we have another story. This is very recent. This is like a couple days ago. Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph director Rich Moore leaves Disney and Pixar and signs an exclusive overall deal with Skydance Animation. Rich Moore, director of Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph, has inked an exclusive multi-year overall deal with Skydance Animation. Under the terms of the deal, Moore will create, develop, and produce original animated features for the studio. So Richard Moore gave us Zootopia. And we have talked about Zootopia on this channel. And I think if you look at the pattern that's forming, not just around the men who have left Pixar to go work at Skydance with John Lasseter, who was a Me Too'd sexist sexual harasser guy that these guys used to work with, you might notice there is a thread that runs through not just the people that are moving away from Pixar, but also in their work. And that's the thing that I'm trying to like show you guys. Okay. So.
Okay. Can I blow your minds a bit? Cause there's some stuff that from the original version of Zootopia.
Oh, I have that. The deleted scene.
Do?
I have the deleted scene.
Yes. From let's okay.
Yeah. So first,
is this the deleted scene? Oh,
this is not. This is the scene from the end of the film where I don't remember her name, but the sheep. She's like a mayor, I think. And
no, she's the mayor's assistant.
Oh, the mayor's assistant. Yeah. And she is essentially confronting Judy Hopps and Nick. Is that his name? The fox. And this is at the end of the movie. So again, you know, if you haven't seen Zootopia, we could summarize the plot briefly. Alison, why don't you do it? Because you talked about this movie quite a bit when it first came out. We did a video on it. I think it's one of our most popular, most watched videos. Yeah.
Yeah, on the original main channel. So the plot of Zootopia is a little bunny rabbit wants to become a cop, but of course she has the impediment of being tiny, and she manages to overcome it to become a cop.
It's a world of animals. Everybody's
a
an
world
animal.
of animals. Yes, it's a world of animals. And then she gets embroiled with this strange conspiracy, and one of the main tensions in this world of animals is between the herbivores and the carnivores. The herbivores are extremely nervous and suspicious and wary of, and they're also docile and agreeable, and they're wary of the carnivores. And the carnivores are sort of subject to this constant attitude that they're a danger, and they need to be kept under control. So if you think about it, it does have a little bit of a metaphor for men and women. I think that other people have said it's a racial metaphor. I think it's actually more solidly a metaphor for men and women, and you'll see with this deleted scene how likely that is. And so there's this tension, and in the context of this tension, or overlying this tension, is these strange happenings where carnivores are becoming violent and attacking people. And she starts to investigate these occurrences with a fox that she sort of shanghais, because a fox con artist who she shanghais into helping her by threatening him with tax evasion, and sort of Bob's your uncle. And then we go through the whole thing. And one of the things that's interesting is that there is a badger character in this. And in the original version of the badger character was supposed to be a champion for the innocence of the carnivores.
Oh, that's weird.
So isn't that weird?
Wow,
like the badger
really
character
weird.
was supposed to be advocating for I'm pretty sure that this was no, the badger character was a conspiracy theorist who essentially said the carnivores were being set up as scapegoats by people who wanted to make them seem to be more violent than they actually were. So, or were pretending to, or trying to frame them as being more violent than they actually were. So think about that. The badger character was trying to expose people who were framing the carnivores, who in some ways sort of represent men, as being violent.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that, but that's pretty crazy.
Well, it isn't. No, I thought it was a very interesting theory because of the main reason why the race angle doesn't work. Although I do think that a lot of people did interpret it that way, the main reason why it doesn't work is because the carnivores, they hold all of the like positions of power. Like the mayor is a lion, and the chief of police is like another predatory animal or something. Like they actually hold a lot of positions of power. in the society. And so the perception would be that it would make, or at least authority and responsibility. So the perception would be that if it was about race, it wouldn't make sense that the minorities that are being portrayed as carnivores would actually hold positions of political sway, right? It doesn't really make sense. So, okay, but anyway, let's play this clip. So there's this sheep, and she's confronting Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde, who have essentially the evidence that is necessary to expose the plot.
I'll go ahead and I'll take that case now.
You know what? I think Nick and I will just take this to the ZPD.
Run. Get them.
All right, I'm just pausing it there. Notice that the woman who's behind the whole thing is the smallest character, well, at least one of them, and she's literally a sheep, which I think is I think it's kind of funny, right? But she's actually the mastermind, and that is it's one thing to, like, if you're just doing it for the plot twist of, oh, this is the person you least expect, but it's not just that. There's more there. Like, there's, because she's extremely passive, it's a female character. I think that there is something about that is definitely going on. Another thing I wanted to mention too is that Zootopia 2 was in development hell for a long time. And they still haven't made one, but I will say that if they do, the guy behind Zootopia is not going to be involved. So you might want to consider the fact that it may not, be in line with the theme of the original film, because they're probably going to try to shift the narrative to something else. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Alison, but if not, I'm going to play the deleted scene.
Let's do it.
All right. This is involving the polar bears, right? Is it the same one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a deleted scene. It's unfinished for the first Zootopia. But this sort of like sends home like what
did you mention the control collars?
Well, they are going to mention control collars here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
So maybe we don't have to explain it.
Yeah, maybe not. But let me play this. Let's play this clip. Now, look, it's not going to be animated well. It's not going to be high definition, and parts of it won't be animated at all. Just so you know, there's actually another deleted scene where they take the collar off of Nick, and I don't know if you remember that, but that was another deleted scene. Yeah,
but this one is more powerful, I think.
Yeah. So there's this baby polar bear getting his collar from his father.
Yeah,
okay?
and it's a control collar so that other members of their society don't have to feel afraid of them.
Yeah. So it's essentially a control collar so that the herbivores don't feel
afraid.
Afraid. Okay.
With this collar, Zootopia welcomes you.
With this collar, Zootopia welcomes me.
With this collar, Zootopia celebrates you.
With this collar, Zootopia celebrates me.
With this collar, Zootopia accepts you.
With this collar, Zootopia accepts me.
I'm just pausing there for the banana. So there's like a ceremony, and they put the collar on him. Feel it warming up like a bomb.
You missed one section. I don't know if you played it. With this collar, and he chokes when he says it. With this collar, you become a choke. Like he can't say it. Do you remember that?
Oh,
there was a part of that, wasn't there?
I don't know. That might have been a different bit.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I remember. Like they made it really clear. Like with this collar, you become a man. And
it's something like that.
Yeah, Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is originally this. I think this was much more clearly a metaphor. Of course, they had to crush it because you can't do that. But I think this was much more clearly a metaphor for masculinity in our society.
Yeah, the bear. Let me go back a little bit because there was another thing.
Morris. Morris.
Yeah, so that is the deleted scene. Or at least part of it. I don't know the thing you're talking about.
But that's toxic masculinity, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, toxic masculinity is putting on the collar so women aren't afraid of you.
Yeah.
Of your emotions.
and interestingly enough, this guy, Rich Moore, was also involved with Wreck-It Ralph. Now, I there are some things about Wreck-It Ralph that I think do speak to men. It's a little like it's not as clear cut or maybe as but there is something about Wreck-It Ralph's plot, and especially when you compare it to Wreck-It Ralph 2, which was, oh my god, it was just Wreck-It Ralph 2 was awful. Like, Moore quit after Wreck-It Ralph 2 because they essentially made it like they did. It was horrible because they took the same. I'll explain why they're different. Let's listen to some. Let's watch some clips of Wreck-It Ralph, and then I'll tell you, like, if you've seen the second one, Ralph Breaks the Internet or whatever. You could see like the mirroring that's happening, but it's being treated completely different. So this is Ralph.
Yeah, Ralph, as fellow bad guys, we've all felt what you're feeling, and we've come to terms with it.
Really? Right here? I'm Zangief, I'm bad guy. Hi, Zangief. Hi, Zangief. I relate to you, Ralph. When I hit bottom, I was crushing man's skull like sparrow egg between my thighs. And I think, why do you have to be so bad, Zangief? Why can't you be more like good guy? Then I have moment of clarity. If Zangief is good guy, who'll crush man's skull like sparrow's egg between thighs? And I say, Zangief, you are bad guy. But this does not mean you're bad guy.
Well, okay, so what was I gonna say?
That's really cute. I like that.
It is. But Zangief is trying to help Ralph because he's basically saying that like your job does not define what you are. And I know he's doing it in like a silly way, but that's what he's telling him, right? Like it's like what does Ralph learn by the end of the movie? He learns that, life as a bad guy in a video game it's like I don't want to say it's about conformity, but it's about like understanding that, your purpose, not your purpose, what you do doesn't have to define you in ways outside of that. And you could take joy out of like where you are in life, I guess. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does make sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, like the Zangief he basically told him like what he learns by the end of the film. He said it like right off in the beginning. And there's like another scene that I thought was what's right here. Yeah. I thought this was really interesting too. So on the left, you have Wreck-It Ralph, the end of Wreck-It Ralph. On the right, you have the end of The Iron Giant. And Wreck-It Ralph is directed by a different guy, Rich Moore. Iron Giant is Brad Bird. But note the parallels.
I'm bad, and that's good. We'll never be good, and that's not bad.
You are who you choose to be.
There's no one I'd rather be than me.
So interesting parallels there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely very interesting parallels.
Mm-hmm. And what was Wreck-It Ralph 2? What was that about? Now, again, more was involved, but I think that was the last movie he made with Disney. Essentially, Wreck-It Ralph 1 was a guy who didn't feel like he felt like he had to change his life, and essentially like he wanted the he wanted all of the kudos and status that comes with being a good guy, right? That's what he is trying to pursue. That's why he enters another video game. It's like the Halo / Gears of War game, and he's terrified. He's not, he's not prepared, and then he ends up going on this adventure and learns by the end that he has a place where he belongs and it's okay. And so he learns that, right? And he basically because it's not just for him, it's for the people in the game, like Fix-It Felix and the little people that live in the building, right? And so when Ralph leaves the video game repairman, or the owner of the arcade, realizes something wrong with the game, and so he can't figure out what to do to fix it, and he thinks about, well, I guess I'm gonna have to shut it down, right? So there's the stakes grow as Wreck-It Ralph goes on, and then he learns that he kind of has a responsibility, and so he goes and pursues that. In the second one, they do the same kind of plot, but they do it with Vanellope Sweets, who is the little girl character that he befriends in the first movie. And in Vanellope's case, she literally abandons the game. She just says, I don't want to do this. And then she goes into some other game and she basically just hangs out with them. And no responsibility, no attachment to, the game that she was in before. Like, she just leaves it all because she just has to do what she wants to do, and everyone just has to accept it. And it's really weird because it's literally just like you said, Alison, it's like remove all the accountability when you could tell the same story with a girl. I'm just going to leave the game and I'm just going to go and do this. And I'm going to hang out with my lesbian friend in this other video game, and we don't need anyone. And she leaves Ralph too, who they paint.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
You take a boy's story, you remove accountability. And what was the other one? Logic and accountability, reason and accountability.
Reason and accountability, yeah.
Reason and accountability, and then you have a girl's story. So with Wreck-It Ralph, he has to learn to be responsible for his game. With Penelope, she has to learn to be responsible for her own random urges to do whatever she wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not like the exact opposite of responsibility. So Wreck-It Ralph, as a male character, has to learn responsibility. Penelope has to unlearn it. Yes. And that's a good thing.
Yep. Exactly.
And it's
right.
actually sort of repulsive, to be honest. I remember watching the second Wreck-It Ralph. I'm like, this is grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
This is absolutely grotesque. Like, the boys' version is about the consequences of your actions. The girls' version is about how the consequences of all your actions are somebody else's fault or somebody else's problem.
Yeah, she even she attacks him in the second movie, I think. And he doesn't. It's not like there's a a remorse or like an apologetic thing or anything. She just does what she wants. And
what's interesting is that while these individuals who write this claptrap, actually, you know what? It just occurred to me. They probably know that this is disempowering to women. That's why they do it. But when you do that, when you have this female character who does not take responsibility for her actions, and I was thinking, for some reason, My Little Pony popped into my head. I think that's why a lot of people like the My Little Ponies, because they actually do take responsibility. But in this case, she didn't. When you have a female character that takes responsibility for none of the consequences of her actions, foists them off onto other people, or in this case, Penelope foists the consequences of her actions off onto Ralph. Ralph has to step up and accommodate her emotionally. Mm-hmm. Ralph becomes the main character in that instance.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is the one who's doing the emotional work. Penelope isn't. Penelope is just she literally, when they write female characters like that, it's no longer a character. It's just when you take away that agency, that sense of agency, the character, and the expectation they take responsibility for their actions, they cease to be a character and simply become an empty vessel for like an empty vessel upon which the man's story is written. Because in that moment, Ralph becomes the character, becomes the main character, because he is the one who is doing something, who's taking responsibility. And no matter what, that's going to be the one that we gravitate towards. Ralph is the one who's taking agency. That is the main character by definition in storytelling. So in giving Penelope this infinite license, you actually erase herself completely. And you know what's really interesting is I am not convinced they aren't doing it deliberately to women and girls.
You think that they are deliberately doing that?
I think they might be, because it totally, like, I can't emphasize this enough. Penelope becomes a non-character when her consequences of her actions are placed on someone else's shoulders other than her.
Yeah, they actually try to make Ralph the villain of the second movie.
She becomes, well, they try to make it, but as soon as he takes responsibility for her emotions, he's no longer the villain. Like, how can you argue that? Villains don't take responsibility for other people's emotions. Okay. But it's like, when you take away the consequences of Penelope's actions, like the connection between her choices, her actions, and their consequences, you take away a huge part of the recognition of her humanity. And you stop seeing her as a character or as an agent or as a person or as having a self. It's by definition. And I don't know if maybe this is something that's really difficult to articulate. Maybe I can use an example. Some people who've read my fiction say that when I write female characters, each of the female characters I write is very distinct. And they're very distinct because I can use another axis of characterization, which is their sense of responsibility, their sense of agency, the consequences of their actions. When you take that away, every woman becomes the same woman. And with the only difference between women being their attractiveness and their age, and every woman ceases to be an actual human being. Which is, like I said, I don't know if this is deliberate, but it certainly is dehumanizing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what did you want to say about Wreck-It Ralph?
I was just gonna tell for people who might not know. So, in the end of Wreck-It Ralph, so the thing that runs throughout Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is the second Wreck-It Ralph movie. What's going on with Vanellope, which we've already talked about, is that, you know, she just wants to live. She doesn't have any attachment, any responsibility. Like, literally, she's gonna leave the game, and then they don't show it, but the game repairman is gonna have to shut that down, which is basically going to kill all of the other racers in that game, right? So, and like all of the other characters in that, like, Sugar Rush video game that she's supposed to be inside of, because, you know, the game doesn't work. So he's gonna do, it's the same thing as the first movie, as Wreck-It Ralph 1. But Ralph, the thing that they're doing with Ralph throughout that film is that they're painting him as an overly codependent guy who can't stand to not be around Vanellope, and that she is shackled to him in some way, and that he has to detach himself. Yeah, he has to. Well, yeah, but because she wants to be free of him, and
well,
like there is like
pause for a second.
Yeah,
pause for a second. Do you see how that turns her into a obstacle or a condition that he has to overcome? Not a person.
Yeah.
But simply a condition that he has to overcome.
Yeah. No, I know. He's basically too clingy. And I know that it doesn't really make sense that he would be portrayed as a villain, but because he is the one who ultimately takes the responsibility and she ultimately never does. but most people still see it that way because of the imagery, the way that they emotionally tug at you with, Ralph turning into this giant pixel monster and, all of that. So
most people are descending into a pit of madness, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, I know. Which means that not only are they not catching it, but I don't think the people who wrote it are catching that. I think that
the people who wrote it are probably a lot more clever than you give them credit for. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the intent, just like in a cult and a true form of misogyny, because Penelope ceases to be her own character and simply becomes an obstacle to Ralph's growth. And that, maybe this is feminist of me, but boy, fucking howdy does that piss me off.
Yeah.
Like she as a character should be able to grow.
She should.
And overcome some aspect of herself or aspect of herself in conjunction with overcoming some aspect of the environment. But no, she is reduced down to a lesson that he has to learn, as all good women are. They're just lessons that men have to learn. That's all they are. That's according to feminism.
Yeah. No, for sure. So, okay. So that's more. So you have these 3 guys used to work at Pixar when it was at its peak, when it was at its most loved, and that nothing they made could do no wrong, with maybe the exception of Cars. And when they got absorbed into the Disney machine, and I'm not saying it's the fault of Disney, I think it's mainly a problem with that's a broader issue within the animation industry itself. That's why I mentioned the Women in Animation nonprofit and the guild, the Animation Guild, which is supposedly the union that's supposed to protect these guys, but they didn't. So Lasseter starts Skydance because he wants more freedom, more creative freedom in his projects. And Skydance was started by Tom Cruise, who also wanted more freedom in his projects. This is why we have these Mission Impossible movies. And he might, I don't know, I think there's a Top Gun thing that was put on hold because of COVID stuff, but it's still in the works. That's all Skydance, right? And then after Lasseter starts a new company within Skydance, then he gets Brad Bird, who gave us The Iron Giant, The Incredibles. He also directed one of the Mission Impossible movies, Ghost Protocol. So there's clearly a link there. And then we get Rich Moore, director of Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph. These are the creative forces behind these movies. And the reason why I find it really interesting is I've seen a lot of other, cultural YouTubers talking about this. I learned about this story from Clownfish TV, who I've actually had on the show for a fireside chat a while back when the channel was much smaller. And they talked about the Rich Moore story, and they didn't really put it together. They just thought, well, I guess, Disney is not, it's there's problems behind the scenes with people and people are leaving. But I don't think that's what it is. I think that Lasseter, Moore, and Bird want to make films. They want to make work that appeals to men, and they can't because Disney won't let them, because they have, the animation industry itself in many ways isn't going to let them, because it's all becoming female focused now. All of our entertainment is.
And an exclusive part of female focus.
An aspect.
It's not, okay, let's look at My Little Pony, all right? That is supposedly female focused, but the characters in the stories take actions, they make choices, those choices have consequences, and they have to live up to them. Okay? That kind of a story for girls disappears. Look at all of the true mythology, the true folk stories of, in Europe. And you look at the stories of the girls in, the plots, the progression, the character of these girls in these stories. They also have to make choices. Those choices have consequences, and they have to live up to those consequences. Sometimes they have to live up to other people's consequences, and they have to do so without complaining. They have to suck it up in order to actually get to a better outcome for themselves. This concept of respecting a female character's moral agency, You know, the consequences of her actions and recognizing the full humanity of these female characters, like you see in The Incredibles 1 and Elastigirl, she has choices that she's making. They have consequences on her family. Those consequences are negative. She has to learn to develop a new way of looking at the world and a new way of dealing with her family in order to stop these negative consequences towards them and develop a better understanding of herself, her family, you know, her community and everything. So she has to grow as a person. Her family, and in some ways her husband's becomes a lesson for her to develop as a character. These are stories that aren't going to be told. You know, and these men were telling those kinds of stories for girls who actually want to take responsibility for themselves, which is itself, that is empowerment. Connecting your actions and your choices to the outcome of your life is the only form of empowerment that actually exists. Every other form of empowerment is someone selling you snake oil. Okay? So these stories, that was empowerment for Elastigirl, to develop the means to overcome her own handicaps, and in so doing overcome the external obstacle. That is not treating female characters as lessons for male characters like Penelope and Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph 2. Okay? And they can't tell these stories. So it's not just they're not telling stories that don't appeal to men, which is really critical. I want to emphasize. They're also not telling stories that help women develop that sense of themselves as effective agents in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree.
And that is disempowering for women, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and I just want to point that out because I think that saying that it doesn't help men is a very big, important part of the picture. But I would also add.
Yeah, it's not the whole picture.
I don't know. These people?
you can't like exclude like the male point of view and it not have an effect on women on its own, without also like, you know, doing the female point of view, but not the very narrow, specific, like, you know, way that that it's so popular right now.
Okay. Here's the thing. Women are defined in part in opposition, not opposition, but in complement to men. Okay. Yeah. So if you are going to have lessons as a woman, they are most likely going to come from men, which means you have to acknowledge their humanity and your effect on their emotions and take responsibility for that. Literally, that process is where women develop the ability to understand themselves as full human beings. It's sort of like a quid pro quo between men and women. Men have the same process with women. Women have the same process with men. And this fiction doesn't, it's just not, it's anti-human. Brian, it's anti-human. Yeah. It's anti-male and it's anti-human.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
But anti-male and anti-human and anti-female, and it's just anti.
Yeah, anti-family, anti-children, whatever. I was gonna just sort of like organize everything. So this whole thing started from the Me Too movement. So this, like, there is a new burgeoning animation studio within Skydance that is run by Lasseter, and he has Bird and he has Moore working with him on projects, and that maybe I think some good could come out of that if these guys have all the creative freedom that they desire. But this started because the Me Too movement was used to get men fired, to drive them out of this industry. And of course, the Me Too movement is being used, or has been used, to drive men out of all kinds of industries that were dominated by men, so that they could replace them with women. Not in every case, because I think that they also replace them with men who, march in lockstep with their views. But if I've already expressed, and Luke Weber, who was actually watching us, I saw him in the chat earlier. This is a purely political move by feminists in various industries to have them managed and run by women. So these aren't the people who are going to be doing the grunt work. These are going to be people in positions of management, people in power, and they are replacing the men, and they are tearing everything down because, they either want to tell these kinds of stories or they're not talented enough to tell good stories and they think that just being a woman is enough or whatever. But that's how we got here. That's how this is happening. And so when people are ranting about, or talking about what's going on with Disney, what's going on with various other entertainment, remember that a lot of people use the Me Too movement and Time's Up, which is not exactly the same, but close, to essentially remove their enemies from positions that were earned, that were, they worked for. This is why I mentioned the film history of guys like Moore and Brad Bird, who gave us the Iron Giant, before he was essentially brought on board to work with Pixar. And that they just replace them with people who are, either not qualified to do the job, or they're at least not qualified to do the job in the way that we would like them to do, even though the people who put them there think that that's what they want. So I think that what people are missing here is the link between the Me Too movement and the firing of Lasseter, and then the rise of Skydance, and then these other guys who are frustrated that have moved on. I can give you one other example too. Alison, do you know who Sam Raimi is?
No.
Okay, so Sam Raimi is a film director. He used to do horror movies, best known for his cult classic Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, as well as The Army of Darkness. He also directed the old Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies from 2002 on. And he was also the mind behind Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and Xena Warrior Princess. And my mom loved Xena Warrior Princess, by the way. She watched it every weekend, even when it got really weird and they ran out of mythology. He gave us Darkman. He did a lot, okay? A lot. And Sam Raimi, when he went as mainstream as it gets, was basically when he was making Spider-Man 3, which came out in 2006, I think, or whatever. And Spider-Man 3 had a lot of problems. But the main problem with Spider-Man 3 was the studio involvement in Spider-Man 3. So Sam Raimi had just given us Spider-Man 2, which a lot of people still, for many, it's their favorite, not just their favorite Spider-Man movie, but their favorite superhero movie of all time. And there is a lot to love about Spider-Man 2. It is a really good movie. And so they thought, well, after Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi can do no wrong. And of course, he had plans to make a third film. But the execs and the producers, they wanted to get involved. And the main way that they were trying to get involved was they were trying to force Sam Raimi to include Venom in Spider-Man 3. And Sam Raimi, the character of Venom, which is one of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, but kind of one that came later. Venom's from the 90s, whereas his other rogues gallery characters are from the 60s. And Sam Raimi was a guy who loved the 60s stuff. He was older. He liked those characters. That's what he wanted to focus on. And it gave us tremendous success with the first two Spider-Man movies. But the studio wouldn't let up, and they insisted that he include Venom. And so because there was so much studio interference from execs in Hollywood, working at Sony and I think maybe Marvel to a lesser degree, he ended up including Venom in Spider-Man 3, and Spider-Man 3 turned into a mess. To put it simply, it's a mess. Is it watchable? Well, yeah, it's probably watchable today compared to other, more recent films, which are even worse. But Spider-Man 3 has a lot of problems, and most of us accept that as a reality of that movie. And it's mainly because Sam Raimi wasn't given creative freedom. So fast forward to 2022, and Sam Raimi is back with Marvel again, or working on a Marvel film. He's making this new Doctor Strange film. And one would think that a Doctor Strange movie directed by Sam Raimi would be a perfect fit. But Sam Raimi there are a lot of rumors, and a lot of people are saying that there are a lot of problems behind the scenes, and it's coming from the same it's the same thing. It's basically Kevin Feige, who is the executive producer over at Marvel, is interfering with Sam Raimi and essentially like making his life a living hell with all of the shit that he insists that he include, like America Chavez and all of these little like, you know, progressive things and elements that Sam Raimi does not want to put in his movie. And with the success of Spider-Man No Way Home, I think they're also like trying to push in extra shit that Sam Raimi doesn't want to do. And this is actually, well, it's basically deja vu. So, and because of that, Raimi can't do what he wants to do. And so like, he's probably, I think, gonna end up giving us another mess of a film. And I think it's because, again, you know, Raimi likes to work a certain way. His films are very good, I think, when he is given the freedom to make them. And like, honestly, like, I know that a lot of feminists think that Xena is like some feminist show, but I don't think it's that simple. I think it's actually like it was a pretty solid show for TV. So, and I don't think that he was like on that train. So I'm basically saying that, you know, if he ends up phoning this one in and you know, giving us like a pile of shit, don't be surprised, because there's a lot of people interfering with him because they want to include elements that he's not interested in. And you know, this is like a trend that I'm seeing from many directors and writers and, you know, showrunners that want to make good stuff, but they're just finding obstructions at every step.
And how does this go back to the central point of the show?
Well, I mean, in Raimi's case, I guess it's really just another example of like, you know, how
being squashed by the mechanism.
Yeah, being squashed by the mechanism. Yeah, I mean, like and here's another thing too, like if a lot of the people in like positions of, you know, executive authority within these industries are like just women who have been put there, they're not women who are good at their job, which of course I'm sure there are plenty that are, but they're put there for political purposes, like in the animation industry with the Women in Animation nonprofit and their goals. Well, you're going to create a hostile work environment because you're going to have people with chips on their shoulders with positions of power that just want to micromanage people who just want to do their best. And it just so happens that in this case, most of the people that are just trying to do their best are men who are proven, who have a track record, who have, you know, like a history of doing good work. And then there are people who just recently got these positions that just want to interfere and they just want to cram their own things in. So, and yeah, and they're doing it for, I don't know, woke virtue signaling points. It doesn't really add anything. So I do think, I mean, it's not quite the same as what's going on with Skydance, but I do think that there is, it's sort of like demonstrating what I believe is a pattern. And I think that more people are going to leave, not just Disney and Pixar, but you're probably going to see people leaving other companies that are going in the same direction. Like, you know, perhaps DreamWorks is going to go in that way. I thought I had the clip from El Dorado where, I guess I removed it. Yeah, I guess I did. I didn't go with it. The one where the girl, I forget her, Shell,
Shell, yeah,
flirts with the guy, and that gets really sexual. I'm like, wow, this Shell is pretty sexual in this movie. But that's what I mean. DreamWorks stuff was always a little bit more mature, so
more edgy, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Shell was fun. Okay, yeah. So the secret is that they want to tell stories that actually well, to be honest, I think the stories that so the stories that are being told now are demoralizing.
Yeah.
They are anti-human relationship. I mean, I don't even think that once Bo Peep is like telling Woody that he can't, he should run away from his friends, I don't think he really has a relationship with her either. So it's anti-human companionship. It's anti-men, it's anti-women, it's anti-human. It's demoralizing. And my guess is that these guys are not interested in demoralizing fiction. And demoralizing, if you think about it, is literally taking a person and telling them that they are not a moral agent, that their actions don't matter, that aspects of their being don't matter, that their actions don't reflect on their moral. So, for example, if you're a white man, you will never be, because you are not, you're just not in a slot on the progressive stack that makes you moral. You know that for sure, but everybody else on the progressive stack is constantly
vying for superiority within it.
Vying for superiority in the victimhood. But you can't, as a white male, you can't take your moral identity from your actions and from standing up to a set of principles or ethics or a moral code. Because you literally cannot be a moral person because you're a white man on the progressive stack. You can obey those above you, but that doesn't make you more moral, does it? Because we're all racist, sexist, and misogynists. You see what I'm saying? You can't actually take those actions and let them reflect on you as your identity. You, as a white man, you can never be defined by your moral actions more than you're being white and a man, is what I'm getting at. Do you see what I'm saying, Brian?
Yeah.
I mean, we had that long discussion with Sargon, and I was trying to figure out how to explain it, because he was saying, no, white men are expected to be moral agents. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so in the way that you're thinking, because your moral choices as a white, straight cis man will never overcome the fact that you're a white, straight cis man.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying, Brian?
You can't. Yeah. There's no salvation.
There's no salvation.
Right.
You cannot be defined by your morality more than your.
Yeah, it's worse than original sin.
Original sin. When I was reading about it, there's a particular way of looking at original sin. Original sin, yeah, you're right. It's worse than original sin, but this is why. Original sin means that the king is a sinner, the emperor is a sinner, the bishop's a sinner, the pope is a sinner, the peasant is a sinner,
the merchant.
Everybody is a sinner. Nobody gets away from that. Nobody is better or worse than anyone except through their personal choices in this metric. And that is actually an equalizing narrative of morality, and it means you are defined not necessarily by your station in society, although there was a lot of hierarchy in the past. You are defined by your moral choices in the eyes of God. God doesn't give a shit if you're a rich man. He doesn't give a shit if you're an emperor. He doesn't give a shit if you're a peasant. What God gives a shit about is your moral choices in your life. And the progressive stack and intersectionality and critical race theory and all of that removes that from our philosophy, from our belief system, and replaces it with you are defined by your biological features, by what victimhood category your ancestors inhabit. And that is it. That is your primary definition. That is a demoralizing. That is what you do when you want to create people who don't threaten the status quo, who are too demoralized to feel like their actions matter at all. You basically say your actions don't matter. Your moral choices as a white, straight, het man don't matter, because they'll never overcome your, I don't even want to call it original sin, but your unique sin as the biological category that you are. And all of this that's coming out, and I can see why they don't want to be part of it, get away from it, is utterly demoralizing. It is a miserable way of existing. And it is something that is against, I want to say that our narrative tradition in the West is very much about seeing people as primarily defined by their actions and their moral choices and how they respond to the consequences of those choices. And that is like a central and essential part of our narrative tradition. This is destroying it. And I'm guessing what your final analysis, Rage Doge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that these men in going to this new studio are getting away from the demoralization in storytelling.
Yeah.
Or the expectation of demoralization in storytelling.
Yeah. And then they're not taking it lying down. It would seem to me. I mean, they're obviously not going to become like vocal opponents, but they're just going to go to another studio and they're going to create the stories they want. And by the existence of those stories, they are going to have an advantage, because I think that if they're carrying forward the same, like, you know, I guess you could say beliefs that were, or the same themes that were in their films, the ones that we looked at, they're going to make more classics, because the people that they left are incapable of doing that. They're just going to be regurgitating, like, you know, skin suits of other things. So we're going to get a Toy Story 5. Why? Well, because we can't come up with anything, because our greatest, most creative minds have left the company. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think that we should keep an eye on Skydance's animation department, because that's where it seems to me some of the best men in the industry are there. And they're probably going to continue to draw more of the greatest talent to them. And I actually want Laika, the people who do the stop motion, because I know that they've been like financially struggling, because even though all of their films have been really good, they just don't get a lot of it. They don't make a ton of money. I don't know if you know about Laika, but I mentioned them earlier. They did like Coraline.
I remember.
Yeah, Coraline, Paranorman, Box Trolls, and Kubo and the Two Strings. Yeah, Kubo's amazing. It's about,
it's a really good film.
It's a very good film. So, as well as Paranorman, I think it's a lot better than people give it credit.
They're like, what I find from those films is that they make they are sad, but they make you want to be human, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Makes you appreciate being human. And that in that way, it's really beautiful, the relationship that you have, and how to, you know, like, care about them and put them first and stuff like that. So it's like they're very human films. And the stuff, like, for example, what was it, that awful film? Well, maybe not awful, but a Soul. The soulless film. Oh yeah,
Soul. Yeah. See, that was that's what I'm saying. Like, that was kind of also, I don't know if it matters as much. I didn't include any clips from it, but Brad Bird also gave us Ratatouille, and Ratatouille has the same theme as Iron Giant. It's about walking your own path as an individual. And if you liked, I know for some people they love Ratatouille, and I forgot to mention it, but that's another Brad Bird thing, and it's about individualism. It's about not letting, like, you know, yourself be defined by what other people expect. It doesn't mean that you reject any, like, responsibility or moral agency, though. It's about, like, not letting people put you in a box. So and
no, I mean, they still have consequences for the choices. Like, the eatery gets shut down because rats are and they have to be honest about what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's elements of moral agency in that if you do something different, you may not get the success that you expect.
It's risky. Yeah.
It's risk. But that's the thing. Like, he did this different thing, and he sort of initially, like Ratatouille, or what's the rat's name again?
Remy is the rat's name. Remy. Yeah, Remy.
We have like 3 Remys as patrons. It's actually a little funny. But anyways, the rat originally appropriated someone's kitchen in order to get his original success, and he hid what he was. So there isn't it's not just, you know, do what you want, but be honest. And that was the message. Be honest. And when he was honest, he lost the restaurant, but the critic ended up supporting him, and they got a smaller restaurant. So they had less success, because a lot of people don't want to eat from rats. Don't want to eat meals prepared by rats. But they had an honest success. So they weren't part of this like 3-star restaurant, but they had their own cafe based on being honest about who they are, you know? And it is an interesting message because honesty doesn't sell. But on the other hand, you can live with yourself. And if you're good at what you do, you can make a small and modest living. You know, I think there's a message there for many people. But you know, you're not going to get huge amounts of. You're not necessarily going to get huge amounts. This is what I've noticed in life. If you're honest, prepare to have a fairly small audience. But anyway, so that was the message of that film. I mean, he was who he was, but in being who he was, that doesn't mean you get everything you want, that you get every success handed to you. That was part of, I think, the moral message of the film.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah.
You know, but being true to yourself means that you are, well, you're true to yourself. You can live with yourself at the end of the day, and you're not lying to others. But yeah, that's that. Ratatouille, I think, it had that kind of message, and that itself is also a very moral message. You know, it's something that recognizes the importance of making moral decisions, the importance of standing in your truth, and also recognizes, like, it's not the fatuous bullshit about, yeah, you go, girl, you stand in your truth, you get everything you want. No, it's not true. You often don't. But you become a person of integrity, and a person of integrity can live with themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's the message I took from that. And again, a very moralizing. There needs to be like a word, because we got demoralizing. So what's the opposite of demoralizing? Remoralizing?
Remoralizing? Yeah, I guess.
Up-moralizing? Pro-moralizing?
Aspirational,
but I don't know if aspirational, because it's the act of returning to understanding that people are primarily defined
I think
by their actions and choice.
If you're
their
returning,
actions and choices.
Yeah.
But it is going back to recognizing that people are defined by the content of their character and not the content of their trousers or the color of their skin.
Right.
And that is, I think, the central pillar of the Western narrative tradition and Western moral tradition and ethical tradition. Like that is right the bullseye, right at the bullseye.
Yeah.
And there's stories, the guys you're going to, because I get your secret that you're trying, the stories of the people who are the men who are going to Skydance are all about individual moral agency and recognition of the consequences of actions for both male and female characters.
Yep.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's a conscious decision, but they made the decision to leave because they're tired of telling demoralizing. And I just want to point out, like, fourth Toy Story, you know, break all your relationships for your girl or something. I guess that's the message of it.
Yes.
Be free. Or destroy your relationships and be free.
Yeah, that's Wreck-It Ralph 2 as well.
Ralph 2.
Yep. Destroy
your relationships and be free. And it's like, what the hell are you trying to tell people? This is horrific crap. Like, what gives us dignity is our relationships to each other. You know, like, what else do we have at the end of the day? Except the connections we make and the love we share with you. And here you are telling us this absolute effluent crap about how, oh no, be free, break your relationships. I honestly, Brian, I honestly think that they're doing this intentionally.
I think so too. I think it is about demoralization. I'm reminded of another movie that Brad Bird was involved with. I believe it was Brad Bird, but it might have been more, which is what's the name of the movie? Inside Out, where with the emotions. And Inside Out was it is an interesting film because did you see Inside Out, Alison?
Yes, I did.
That one
yes,
with Joy and and how it turns out that sadness is what the girl needed, and that she was the sadness emotion was the most important at that time because Joy wanted to keep her from anything negative. And so she was willing to sabotage that girl's emotional well-being to preserve happiness. I think that's really interesting. So I haven't seen that one in a while, but that's another one that I believe either Rich Moore or Brad Bird were involved with. So if you guys have seen Inside Out and you want to comment on that, what are your thoughts? Go ahead and put them in. I do have some super chats, and I did find that I did have the El Dorado thing, and I figured since I already queued it up, we'll watch a little bit of this. El Dorado was also made by Brad Bird, so this is another one that he was involved with.
I have a comment.
And it's a buddy movie. That that goes back to what I was saying.
Whoa! No! Big trouble! Whoa!
Look, sweetheart, we're in the middle of a con here, walking the razor's edge. On the one hand, gold. On the other hand, painful, agonizing failure.
I like Tulio.
Yeah, no, I love Road to El Dorado. It's good.
Yeah, I do too.
But
oh man.
Let me play a little bit more of it because it's just good.
I can't afford any distractions. So I'm sorry. So sorry. But perhaps another time? Another place?
Too bad. I'm free now.
These guys are wrong for this. These guys are, whoever was involved, they were wrong for this.
I'm not really sure I trust you.
Well, I'm not really.
Yeah, well, no shit, Tulio.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That was.
I mean,
wow.
They wouldn't do this now because it's we wouldn't want to treat Shell like a sexual object, even though she was literally conning them with her feminine wiles. That was like, the whole point. There is one more funny bit that a lot of people talk about. It's kind of weird.
Whoa!
My lord.
Now, what was she doing? Nope. He's over here. She's there. It's what is going on? Anyway.
Yeah, actually there's a great analysis of the Road to El Dorado as okay, there's an older series of videos that this was a takeoff of.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. I just can't remember the name of them. But anyway, it's a great analysis. I'll see if I can find it really quickly. Road to El Dorado. Why don't you do your super chats?
Oh, okay. So let me read the super chats. So we got I got an after show to do too. So Richard Bier gives us $4.99 and says, "Have you heard the reactions from progressives who accidentally watched a film produced by the Daily Wire film production division? Hilarious." No, I have not. I don't know what movie you're talking about either. I know that they've been making movies, and I'm glad for them, but I haven't really seen any of them. Scapegoat gives us $5 and says, "I wish I caught the beginning of this. I love this movie, and Allison's take on it is absolutely fascinating." Thank you, Scapegoat. I'm not sure what movie we're talking about because we talked about several, but I think
maybe Iron Giant.
It was, I was gonna say we did spend a lot of time on Iron Giant, so maybe it was Iron Giant. Which, I mean, who doesn't like?
Zootopia.
Or Zootopia. Yeah, it might have been Zootopia.
My take on Zootopia is a lot more, I don't want to say controversial, but not necessarily as obvious, perhaps.
Yeah. Richard Bier then gives us $4.99 and says, "Even with the collar, women are still afraid of men. So what is the point of the collar? Perhaps it could end any man. It still wouldn't be enough." Well, I mean, the collar is a metaphor for some kind of control mechanism on carnivores. So I think that if feminists could do that, they would have men wear collars probably. And even if it was just for the enjoyment of making them wear them. So, but I mean, you could say that in a way they do. It's called the state. Pengi Goy gives us $4.99 and says, love when you guys discuss films. I actually really like talking about culture. It's one of my favorite things to do. So this is why I put all this together, because I did think it was really interesting. And yeah, it's talking about these things in a way that most don't think. Like this shell scene, I didn't just play it for, you know, to encourage the horny. I did it because I wanted to show that you don't get this anymore. Like you can't have, you know, men and women experiencing sexual tension in animated films.
Also, doesn't she sort of fall for Tulio too?
Eventually, yes, eventually. But like at this point, she's trying to get the gold. I think she's conning him while he's conning the rest of the.
Although she sort of plays herself, I think.
People.
I
haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, I don't remember exactly. But thank you, Pengi Goy, for that. I love talking about, like I said, cultural things. Albert Nada Retro gives us $10 Canadian and says, I'm sorry, but when you work for a tyrant like M. Bison or kidnap Princess and try to kill Mario and Luigi, what you do does define you. Zangief is a goof. Well, Zangief doesn't work for Bison. So, but thanks for the super chat nonetheless. The people in the video game world of Ralph, they treat it like a job. It's not like literally they hate, you know, they're just doing a job. Albert Nader Retro gives us $5 Canadian again and says, now maybe your animator buddy and Vic Mignogna can go work at Tom Cruise's company. Well, you know, Vic Mignogna could probably find work there. Luke, yeah, I think it'd be great. I think that he's extremely talented. He should at least, you know, try to apply, because look, I wouldn't go so far as to say that Skydance is like, they're not in any way anti-feminist. They probably don't even know why things happen to them at Disney and Pixar. But they just want to like make what they want to make. And it just so happens that the themes that they enjoy, they're more political than they think they are in the eyes of, you know, the Women in Animation organization. And then lastly, we get a super chat from Space Zoo for $10. And he says, I told Mr. Girl to talk to you guys. Talk to Mr. Girl. All right. I don't know who he is. But I guess I'll look it up.
Maybe give us a little bit more in depth on that.
Yeah, don't just tell us to
Badger
get...
Rights. Yeah, send it to badgerrights@gmail.com. And we can see what you're on about, because this is a little bit obscure for us.
Yeah.
Give us a little assist on this one.
Yeah, give us a little bit more info about who Mr. Girls is and why.
Badger Rights.
And what will we talk to him about? I would like to know that too. Yeah, you can email us at badgerrights@gmail.com. All right, I have one too. I have one. Oh, good.
Yes,
is
I
it
do.
a donation?
I want to make sure I got it. Yeah, it's from Superchow, which is on our own website at thebadger.com/just-the-tip.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Chell and Tulio. Just the tip. Okay.
All right.
No. And it's 25. It's from Euclid.
Mm-hmm.
Euclid. And he says, no cosmic wisdom. Actually, one. HBR analyze a lot of stuff very well, but the thoughts are very scattered. So it's hard to recommend a specific video of yours to someone who wants to discover you. Apart from Typhon Blue's channel. Would you create a format to balance that? Ilkwe. Yeah, it's just a lot of work. To be honest. I'm just getting completely
I'm in danger.
Yeah. Like it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have people who put out stuff. If anyone wants to help with doing time codes to the various topics or anything that they think is interesting, that, you know, you can always volunteer. But other than that, it's just a lot of work. So there you go. And you know, like we do other jobs, and also Brian does other jobs, and also there is a lot of stuff going back, and it's one of the things that makes this job a little bit difficult is the fact that YouTube is constantly YouTube, Twitter, all the big platforms are constantly screwing around and making things change or worse, or trying to get after us for things that we didn't do or we maybe did do but didn't understand, and it's like a constant troubleshooting. So it could get really grating. I'll put it that way. To feel like you're constantly under attack. So like I said, if we can get any volunteers to maybe chop up the streams into things that are interesting to people, sure, we could do that. Or maybe I can look into getting our time coders to just cut out little segments that are more shareable. But what I did notice about that is they did not get as much attention as our streams. Like, I know everybody's like, why don't you cut out things or make smaller content? Yeah, it just doesn't generally get as much attention as our streams. And then people also get irritated. They're like, why does this condensed stream? It's neutered. It's been castrated. I don't want this. This isn't true Badger. So it's like, yeah, nobody's ever happy, you know?
Yeah,
it's impossible.
I know. It's probably not a good idea to try to please everyone.
Yeah. I thought about it over the last, almost 10 years. We have thought about it, but this is our format. You're free to do it yourself too. And if you just put a link back to the stream, Bob's your uncle. But anyway, so thank you to Yulkui for $25 and to everyone else who donated. And I would like to remind you or supported that you can do a tip at any time through feedthebadger.com/justthetip. That's one time. And if you were interested in some reoccurring options, you can go to feedthebadger.com and look up a subscription. Or you can help us out for our monthly fundraiser at feedthebadger.com. There's a commonality in all of this. I hope you noticed. feedthebadger.com/projects/badger-media-blitz. I should do a custom URL for that too. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll go into the patron only show. I have like a article.
If you'd like to join us and you are not currently a patron, you can.
Yep.
Did I mention feedthebadger.com?
Feedthebadger.com. All right. So anyway, a brief acknowledgement. The one thing about Spider-Man 3 that is good that we got out of it were the memes. Specifically memes regarding Bully Maguire as well as Rent. This is free country. This is not rent-free country. And without the most base thing ever, that ever came out of that movie would be that line. And with just like the prequels, the Star Wars prequels. So anyway, we're going to head into the patron-only show. We're going to look at this article from Gizmodo, which is about a Dungeons and Dragons oriented thing. Yeah, I know, really nerdy shit. It's what I like. I want to talk about it, and too bad if you don't like that. But it
you
is.
Be you.
Yes, I am being me. That's right.
Just realize that you may not be super popular if your truth is not being like a hot blonde chick.
I can accept that.
Republican.
I can accept that. So yeah, and we'll get into the article here regarding this newest product from Wizards of the Coast, which is going to be trash. I don't think it's going to sell, but we'll see. And I'll talk about it and what we discuss. What?
Don't hold back, Brad. Don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel.
It's going to be trash. Like they've made
but
like.
Is it going to be the good trash that
No,
it's
going to be absolute garbage.
Some trash is good trash, Sometimes you just want to be trashy. But I think that this is more. It's more like radioactive dog vomit.
Yeah, this is. It's going to be awful. Like their sales in the last couple of books have been like low as fuck because they're trying to like appease the woke crowd, and the woke crowd don't buy anything. So it's not selling, and I think this is going to be. I don't know about the last nail in the coffin, but it's probably going to do worse than the others, than the previous attempts. So we'll read about it in the patron show. If you guys like this video, please smash like or give us a rumble. I think they call it a rumble when you do like a +1 on Rumble. Subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Rumble. especially Rumble, because some content will only be on Rumble if it's a little too risque for YouTube. Yeah. And I mean spicier than that scene from El Dorado. And
but we also have Odyssey too. And yep.
D Live.
So,
we're on D Live.
Yeah, whenever Odyssey actually gets their shit in order in terms of streaming, we'll probably put it on that as well. And D Live too.
Yeah, we're on D Live as well. So look it up.
I might start us back up on Twitter because maybe I was dumb to stop it, but yeah.
I don't know. We weren't getting a ton of people watching on Twitter, but
yeah,
you know,
I think they prefer the
Instagram might, if they do streaming and we could link it, Instagram might be the move.
Options. It's like it's demoralizing.
Yeah, it's just like you're scattered everywhere. You feel like it's just all, I don't know. It's like throwing confetti and asking people to find the one. Can you find the silver confetti that I threw? So anyway, where was I? Yeah, so give us a follow over on Rumble, and here you can subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications on YouTube, and share this video. And if you could share it, we'd really appreciate it. Also, if you do share it on Rumble. Try to get other people to go to Rumble and make that more of their regular platform. There's a lot of users are there. So
HB Radio.
Yeah, HB Radio on Rumble. So thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
There are two kinds of metal in this yard, scrap and art. If you gotta eat one of them, eat the scrap. What you currently have in your mouth is art! Forget it. It's gone. It's not bad.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.